A dream 30 years in the making is a reality. The Florida Panthers have won the Stanley Cup.
Lord Stanley is coming home. You always will have a place in South Florida. Oh my God!
The Panthers have won the Stanley Cup for the first time in franchise history.
Yeah!
Elliotte, congratulations to the 2024 Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. What a wild ride that was. Welcome 32 Thoughts, presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Marek alongside Friedman and Dom Schramati. Elliotte, you were there. Before we get into the specifics of the entire Game 7, just give us the scene. Give us the feeling. Give us the vibe check. Give us everything that you experienced from your perch at Game 7.
The thing I always remember after these games are over is who's on the ice, who you see on the ice, who's most emotional, who says the most interesting things, what stories you uncover in terms of families. Those were the things that I always remember about the Stanley Cup being presented. The way it works at our place is that Kyle goes on and does the first couple of interviews, and then Dave and I go out and join and do the rest of them with Kyle together. And there's always things that you see and things that you notice that stick with you for a long time. First of all, Paul Maurice, who gave a fantastic interview to Kyle where he shouted out the Winnipeg Jets.
Great.
And said, I hope they win the next one. So anybody who wagers, don't bet on the Panthers to repeat. Maurice is already voting for the Jets next season.
Jinx the Panthers.
But that was great. And also, Maurice's wife, Michelle, came on the ice. And she was very emotional, obviously, because the family had won. And I say the family won because the families win together. And one of their daughters had been at the last 3 games and they'd lost all 3. So she had been sent back to Winnipeg. Now, sent back might be a bit of an exaggeration because I believe she's a teacher. So she had to go back for work. And if I'm mangling this story, I apologize, but it's something like this. But I believe her work said, forget it, go back to Florida. And she walked out onto the ice, got dropped off in an Uber as they won the Stanley Cup. That's a story that is powerful to hear. Jonah Gadjevich, he had baby twins on the ice. He said it was their first NHL game. I said, really? They're not going to expect anything less than this from now. And he kind of laughed. One's name was Lion. I think the other was Adley. Apologize if I'm getting the names wrong. But so seeing him on the ice with a baby carrier in each hand, it was awesome sight. I would also mention Rick Dudley. Rick Dudley in the NHL for 45 years. And finally gets a ring. Okposo, Ekblad, Barkov, the Kachucks. I mean, you can name them all. Also, Brian McCabe, we interviewed him, and he got emotional. His father-in-law passed away last week. Luongo. Those are the stories that you remember, is just the people that you see, especially the ones who waited a long time to win it, how emotional they get and how emotional their families get. And there was a large contingent of Panthers fans who moved down to the front and stayed there for a while. And I really believe fans should be rewarded. It doesn't happen this way, but once in your lifetime, you should be able to see your favorite team, or at least one of your favorite teams, celebrate something. So I'm always happy to see the celebration. That's what I remember, is the stories on the ice.
I thought it was fantastic. I thought the whole night was great. I thought the game was marvelous. Verhaeghe scores to make it 1-0. Janmark ties it up 2:17 after Verhaeghe opened up the scoring. And Sam Reinhart scores what turns out to be the Stanley Cup winning goal, making it 2-1. It's short side, just goes under the glove. And I got to tell you, That one was a if you follow the gameplay and know what the Oilers did to change things around to get back into the series. What did we always talk about, Elliotte? The Oilers started collapsing around the net. They didn't start chasing wide. They didn't start, chasing guys into the corner, chasing guys to the boards. So on that play, the Oilers again collapse, giving Sam Reinhart, a 57-goal scorer, an uncontested clean shot at Stu Skinner, and he buries it. In a lot of ways, Elliotte, what worked for the Oilers to get back into the series ended up costing them the game with that Sam Reinhart winner. That's a tough one.
Well, Verhaeghe with a great screen. He didn't see it.
Yep.
We talked about the long travel and how long this series was. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but it gave us the best possible Game 7. Because that extra day of rest and relaxation, I think it really helped to give us a great, intense Game 7. And the other thing I really believe is that it helped Florida recollect. In our last pod, we talked about Kevin Lowe and how he said in '94, the Rangers won the Stanley Cup because they had that extra day off between Game 6 and 7. I think the extra day off between Game 6 and 7, if you heard the Panthers talk post-game, they recollected, they refocused, and in Game 7, they played more their game than the Oilers did. How many days they scored on a great tip on the first goal, and how many times, Jeff, did they come close later in that first period? They were tipping a lot of shots. They had layers around McDavid. They never let him wheel. They never let the Oilers wheel. I mean, the Oilers obviously got the one great goal by Janmark on a breakdown by Florida, but generally their defense was tight. They defended their blue line. They didn't give up rush chances. They got to the front of the net. They got the tips. Florida was the team that was more like themselves in Game 7, and that's why they won. To me, I don't know how you felt, myself watching it. It looked like McDavid was out of gas at the end of this game. I mean, he carried them for 4 rounds, not by himself, but the team was really good, got really good around him. But to me, he looked out of gas in the third period. How did you feel?
There were 3. I feel the same way about McDavid. I also felt the same way about Draisaitl, and I felt the same way about Zach Hyman. Those 3 guys specifically, by the end, Elliotte, they must have been just going on fumes. I don't know how Hyman did it. I don't know how McDavid did it. I don't know how Draisaitl did it. Like, you look at that last rush that the Oilers made, like their last chance, okay, regroup into their own zone, here we go. It seemed as if you could see both Draisaitl as he curled and McDavid as he curled kind of give one of these like, okay, I'm going to give this everything that I have and I don't have a whole lot, and they didn't. But the thing is, I thought about this after the game. If I was Chris Knobloch, because listen, one of the criticisms is going to be, oh, you rode those guys too hard and by the end they had nothing left. If I'm Chris Knobloch, I'm doing the exact same thing. These are my best guys. How do I not keep them on the ice as much as I can? But by the end, those 3 specifically, they left everything. Like, they did not have 1 more ounce of energy to contribute to this series. So I agree with you, but I wouldn't make it exclusive to McDavid. I saw it in Draisaitl and I saw it in Zach Hyman. Those 3 guys for me.
And make no mistake about it, full credit to the Panthers.
Oh, yeah.
They earned the win. They earned the Stanley Cup. And in the third period, on the best chances that Edmonton had, it wasn't just Bobrovsky making the saves. It was Kulikov knocking the puck away. It was Forsling making a hell of a play on McDavid.
I don't know how that didn't go in.
I can't even remember.
I don't even know how that didn't go in.
Who slid into the net or slid into the crease to prevent the other one.
Yeah.
But that was a game where Florida, people began to feel that they had a certain level of team defense that they got away from the last 3 games, really away from. They got back to it in Game 7, and that's why they won. It was a fantastic defensive performance. They just did, like, Edmonton skated rings around them most of the last 3 games. And in this case, aside from the breakdown that led to the Janmark goal, they did not let Edmonton wheel on them. And that was the big difference to me.
Connor McDavid wins a Conn Smythe Trophy, so he joins Reggie Leach as the only forwards to win that most valuable player.
Did you have
in the
a
playoffs.
problem with that?
I had no problem whatsoever. None. None.
You know, I didn't have a vote this year. I didn't have a vote. And but some people, I understand. I really haven't had a chance to look at social, but I understand there were some people who felt very strongly that he shouldn't have won because he didn't have points in games 6 and 7. I disagree with that.
It's totality of the playoffs.
I'm not gonna.
It's totality of the playoffs. It's not just game 6 and 7.
Right.
That's not how you're supposed to vote on it.
But also, and we were talking about this on the drive home. There were a few of us in the car. I didn't think there was a Panther who stole it from him.
No, you know what? Okay, good point. Because this was Bobrovsky's up until game 4. And then the Oilers started to chip away and the momentum changed to Connor McDavid. And all of a sudden it became Connor McDavid's trophy to lose. And what happened in game 6? No one grabbed it away from him. Now, Bobrovsky had an excellent game 7. But was that enough to pry it away from Connor McDavid? Not for me.
Yeah.
Not for me at all.
I don't have a problem with the choice. You know, a couple of my buddies, and again, I wasn't watching it social as much because I was trying to focus on the game. They said one of the most interesting things to them about social media in this game is because it was a game 7 that kind of had the attention of the sports world to itself. There were a lot of people watching that wouldn't normally be watching. Like, one thing I did see was Reggie Wayne, who is a fantastic NFL receiver who played his college football at the University of Miami. He's like tweeting, "I'm watching this game. This is wild. I have no idea what the rules are." And Dan Orlovsky, who is a former NFL quarterback, who's now one of the top analysts in the game. Like, I love watching Dan Orlovsky, and he was tweeting, okay, and he's a great analyst. I really love his breakdowns. He's tweeting about, okay, like, if this McDavid is just as special as everyone says he is, let's see what he's got in the third period. And I found that when I was sent that tweet, I found that very interesting. It said to me that there was the good thing for the sport of hockey on this night was that there were a lot of people who were watching what they normally wouldn't have watched. And I thought the game was super competitive. I thought it was really entertaining. But I kind of wonder if some of those opinions convinced people that maybe McDavid shouldn't have won. But when you look at the totality of the playoffs and 42 points, I've got no problem, none, with McDavid winning the Conn Smythe.
I want to get to what's next with the Florida Panthers, but we still have so much more to go over here. What do you think the effects of this are? Like, last podcast, we talked about what this means for the revenues in the NHL. Having a team like the Edmonton Oilers go to the Stanley Cup final, the Rangers, going to 3 rounds. But outside of the financial situation with the NHL, the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup, like, that's going to do well for the state of Florida and juicing interest in hockey, certainly.
I can't believe the Lightning sent them a congratulatory
I was stunned.
tweet.
I was stunned too. Up to the point where I'm not sure that I like it, Elliotte. I really don't.
They must not have run that one by Julien Brisebois.
I don't know if I like that one. Like, no. I like you guys.
Don't tell the manager that we're doing this.
I like you guys when you hate each other. I don't want all the niceties and all that. Oh, Seattle sent one. Oh, that's nice
Julien
and classy.
Brisebois super competitive.
Yeah, let's not.
I wonder if they hid his phone from him so he couldn't see the tweet.
Let's not do that one, Tampa. I like you guys better when you hate each other. But anyway, like, what do you think the effects of this one will be? Like, especially, like, there's a lot of eyes on it, but, like, what do you think?
I think the number one thing is that you have to be able to check, you have to be able to defend, and when you don't do that, even good teams get embarrassed, like the Panthers did in the middle of this series. I think the other thing is that, I'm going to write about this at some point this week, Jeff, but a few years ago, a manager called the Panthers a sleeping giant to me. He said, to me, the Panthers are a sleeping giant, and I hope they never wake up. And, his point was there was no reason they couldn't be as good as Tampa. And, I think a lot of people can actually blame the Lightning for this, because for years, culminating in their sweep 2 years ago, the Lightning kicked sand in their faces, bullied the Panthers. They were everything the Panthers should have been, but weren't. And now the Panthers have learned their lessons and they're there. And it starts at the top with really stable ownership and, a group that has allowed them to do what they need to do to win. And it's a really well-run organization now. And, I think, Jeff, it'll still continue the debate about these no-tax state teams continually winning Stanley Cups. And, someone asked me if anything can ever be done about that. And the answer is it probably has to happen at the ownership level.
CBA.
The owners are probably going to have to be the ones who decide they're going to want to change that. But to me, the biggest thing is that it tells me that if you're a no-tax state and you have good weather, there is absolutely no excuse for you not to win. And for a long time, the Panthers' biggest enemy was themselves, and they figured it out, and they won. And they're not going to go anywhere.
It's going to be a good market for a long time. No doubt.
They're not going to go anywhere. Yep. Nowhere.
So we are wondering about the order of passing for the Stanley Cup. The train for the Stanley Cup. So Barkov goes to Sergei Bobrovsky.
I was wondering if Ekblad would be second.
Well, I think we both wondered about Kyle Okposo. I thought one of the wild cards might have been Dmitry Kulikov, and he got it after Oliver Ekman-Larsson really early. But do you have a quick thought? Because, essentially it doesn't really matter, but Barkov handing this one over to Bobrovsky first.
No issues. No issues. I will say there were people on our show, I'm not going to say who they were, they had a bet on if the Oilers had won, who was going to get in what order. Okay, so I'll give you an example.
I'm trying to think here.
Who gets the cup first, Perry or Skinner? That was one of the bets.
Perry. I would have taken Corey Perry in that one.
Yeah, that was one of the bets.
Interesting. Okay, so you're talking about David Amber. Okay, good. Okay, we understand that. That's got to be who this is. So Bobrovsky to Kyle Okposo to Oliver Ekman-Larsson to Dmitry Kulikov to Aaron Ekblad. And
I'm actually surprised. I couldn't see this because I was going down to the ice. I'm actually surprised Ekblad got it that late.
I was too. I was surprised that Ekblad got it after Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Yeah. He's been there for a hot 5 minutes. And is still getting paid by the Vancouver Canucks. I didn't mind Kulikov because he was drafted by the Florida Panthers so many years ago and then came back.
Well, you just like Kulikov because he's a CHL guy.
Drummondville, Guy Boucher's team, went to the Memorial Cup as well. Dmitry Kulikov did. Sean Couturier was on that squad. Anyhow, let me ask you about what's next for the Florida Panthers. We all know there's some business that Bill Zito has to get done by Monday. Sam Reinhart is a big piece here. Brandon Montour is another big piece. Aaron Ekblad is 1 year out. Sam Bennett and Carter Verhaeghe are 1 year out. Anton Lundell is an RFA. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is a UFA. You want to triage this one, Dr. Friedman?
No, I don't. Let them celebrate. I don't want to nuke anybody tonight. I'll nuke them later in the week.
Okay, very good then. Okay, so from the Florida Panthers to the Edmonton Oilers, man, that's a gut punch. But, as I said to a lot of people on Monday nights, the Edmonton Oilers just took the entire country, just took Canada for an incredible ride. And I think that is commendable, and it gave Canadian hockey fans something significant to cheer for, and gave that market a real shot in the arm. How do you see it? Connor McDavid didn't come out to accept the Conn Smythe Trophy. Both him and Leon Draisaitl, you can tell, were something else during their interviews in the post game. You can tell. You just
never know. You know how hard it is to get there, and you never know if you're going to get that close again, right?
Well, the one. Whose name I think of when I see Alexander Ovechkin. Alexander Ovechkin, Elliott, had one shot, and he won. Yeah.
And it took, what, 13 years?
And if the Capitals hadn't have won the Stanley Cup that year, Ovechkin could have gone down as one of the greatest players, and he's going to go down as the greatest goal scorer when he gets a Gretzky record. Could have joined that club of best players to never win the Stanley Cup. And I think that dawns on everybody that gets that close and then comes up short. I'm sure McDavid's thought about it. I'm sure
these guys are still young.
thought about it. I know, but the hockey world is littered with guys that get there early in their career and figure, don't worry, I'll be back. And next thing you know, like 15 years later, they're saying, man, I'm just chasing a couple, sign with any team that's close.
Well, this uplifting block brought to you by Jeff Merrick.
No, but I can understand like why they felt the way and looked the way they did after that game.
Well, I think you put yourself all out there and you get that close. Like the longer you go, the harder it is, right? So you go to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, and it's devastating when you don't win it. I think this. I don't want to make any grand pronouncements. I think one of the things that happens is right now you're very emotional. And, Draisaitl has to make a decision about his future. And the hardest thing to do is make it days after you've been through something like this. Like the worst decisions you make are emotional decisions. That's what agents are for, to take the emotion out of it and to talk about it. So I'm not going to make any grand pronouncements now either on the future of Draisaitl or anything like that. I kind of want to see how this unfolds, because a run like this one can affect the way you think. Does that change anything at all about how the Oilers plan or how some of the individual players feel? Like, it's got to be a positive, right?
Yeah.
You just got to within Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. They have a lot of decisions to make. Connor Brown, great playoff, unrestricted. Warren Foegele, great final series, one of the most dangerous players, unrestricted. Adam Henrique and Matthias Janmark, great finals line together, unrestricted. Corey Perry wants to play again, unrestricted. I think Evan Bouchard is due a big raise. Jack Campbell, is there going to be a buyout there? Are they going to keep, it looked like they were going to keep Vincent Desharnais during the season. Now what? And the other thing too is Ken Holland's contract is up in 5 days. And so where is all of this going to go? And I do believe they have a plan. I believe Jeff Jackson, who was hired as the president of hockey operations, has been putting together a plan for some time now. And I think that one of the things he was very careful about is he didn't want anything to get out during the playoffs. He was very careful about asking for permission to talk to people or even discussing who he might want, because he didn't want a distraction. Well, now we're here. We're here in 5 days, and we're going to start to find out some of the answers to some of these questions. But I think, to me, the number one thing is, you always have a plan, or you're trying to put together a plan, and then how much does a run like this change it? Mm-hmm. How does it change the way you feel? How does it change the way players feel? And we're going to get those answers over the next couple of days.
One of the things that I wonder about, I'm glad you mentioned Evan Bouchard. He's 1 year away from free agency, albeit restricted free agency, but nonetheless. Mm-hmm. If you're Evan Bouchard, how much of your decisions rest on the decision that Leon Draisaitl and then afterwards Connor McDavid is going to make? Like, if you're Evan Bouchard, are you just accepting a long-term deal right now from the Edmonton Oilers if they offer it at big money? Or are you saying to yourself, I want to see what this team's going to be all about?
I bet you it's probably both. Because don't forget, he's not a UFA.
No, that's it. I'm saying, like, he's a restricted free agent with arbitration rights at the end of all of this. But if you're Evan Bouchard,
yes,
like, even if they offer you something come July 1st for the next however many years they want to sign, do you not at least need to say to the Oilers, hang on a second here, I'm not ready to sign yet. I want to see what Leon is going to decide and what, how that affects what Connor may decide. I think Bouchard's a fast.
Probably, but again, I haven't.
No, I know.
I haven't spoken to any of these guys.
I'm just
guess.
speculating. That's all. I'm just saying that this is. I don't think this is.
That never ends badly.
This is. Oh, I know, but it's not. I don't think it's as simple as they offer him a massive deal and he takes it. You know, like they could have a whopper there sitting for him. But if you're Bouchard, I don't think it's just as simple as here's the contract, here's where you sign. I think with this situation, it's probably a little bit more delicate. How about that? Elliotte, one other team we should congratulate, in addition to the Florida Panthers, are the Hershey Bears. Congratulations, back-to-back champions, Todd Nelson, back-to-back Calder Cup champion with the Hershey Bears, and it is an overtime goal scored by Elliotte?
A Strome.
Matthew Strome. So I really like Matthew Strome. Now, I like the entire Strome family. I think they're wonderful people. I really do. I spent one night in Quebec City at the CHL Awards sitting with the family, and just delightful people. And I've had a chance to talk to all the kids. But Matthew Strome's always had a soft spot in my heart for a game that I saw in 2015, and it was a minor midget game between the Toronto Marlboros and the Don Mills Flyers, and it was the OHL Cup final, and it went into overtime at the old Maple Leaf Gardens, now known as Mattamy Athletic Center, and Matthew Strome scored the OT winner. The thing about Strome is that guy scores big, clutch goals. OHL Cup championship winning goal in overtime, Calder Cup championship winning goal in overtime for the Hershey Bears. And on that Marlboros team, I'll read you a quick little list of names on that squad. Matthew Strome, Mackenzie Entwistle, Ryan McLeod, who we just saw stand out for the Edmonton Oilers, Kevin Ball, newly acquired Calgary Flames defenseman, and Wendell Clark's son, Cody Clark, was on that team as well. So and then he went on to become the first ever draft pick for the Hamilton Bulldogs, won the OHL championship, went to the Memorial Cup in Regina for the 100-year anniversary of that championship. So I've always had a little soft spot in my little hockey heart for Matthew Strome. So congratulations to Matt Strome, congratulations to Todd Nelson, congratulations to the Hershey Bears, Calder Cup champions for the second time in a row. And now for Dan Bilesma of Coachella Valley, he becomes the head coach of the Seattle Kraken. His time in the American Hockey League, Elliotte, is done.
Well, I'm also wondering if it's going to be time in the American Hockey League done for Todd Nelson.
Well, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah,
yes.
Todd Nelson spent a couple years in the Atlanta organization under Don Waddell.
Yep.
So he knows him. He has a brief stint as head coach of the Edmonton Oilers, 46 games, long years as assistant. Now, Don Waddell says NHL coaching experience matters, and he doesn't have as much as some of the other candidates that they can interview for the job. But I do think he's at the least on their radar.
Would make a lot of sense. Okay, Elliotte, on to the news segment here of the podcast, and we'll start with a trade. The Boston Bruins and the Ottawa Senators pull off an in-division trade. Linus Ullmark, netminder, goes to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for a first-round pick, the 25th overall. Netminder Jonas Korpisalo and Mark Kastelik, 25% of Korpisalo's salary is retained in this one.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, and you talked with David Amber about this on Monday night during the game, no extension here for Linus Ullmark. That one surprised me. Or should I say, no extension yet for Linus Ullmark?
Well, I should have explained it a little bit better on the air in the sense that he's not eligible to sign one until July 1st. Technically, they couldn't have traded him with an extension. But like Jacob Slavin, they can all but commit to it and then announce it July 1st. So I am under the impression here that Linus Ullmark, unless he gets the extension he wants, he is prepared to play this out. So you should always assume that maybe Ottawa will say, look, we will give him what he wants, or we want the extension, and we'll see where this goes. But I have heard that Ullmark has indicated he is prepared to play out next season. Now, look, there are players in the league who get traded somewhere and they end up extending. I know some Ottawa fans didn't like that. They were not happy in my DMs on Monday night, but it's not the end of the world. He's there. He's with you. You get a chance to prove to him that he can help you, or he's going to be happy there, or it's a good team, or things are going in the right direction. It's not the end of the world. But Ullmark, from what I understand, is prepared to bet on himself. Now, I had a manager call me during the game on Monday night telling me gleefully that we all got this story wrong. He doesn't believe, and nobody will confirm this to me, but he doesn't believe Ottawa was on Ullmark's no-trade list. He doesn't think that's the case, at least not this year. I don't know officially when his list changes. I assume it's July 1st, but I don't know that. But he said to me, the word going around the NHL today was that Ullmark did not have Ottawa on his no trade because they'd acquired Korpisalo last year. And he was kind of like, Ottawa's not going to trade for me because they went out and had this other goalie, which I thought was really interesting. Again, there's no confirmation, but he said to me that that is one of the pressures that happened here. Not only the extension, he said we were correct in pointing out that the extension was the thing, but he felt that Boston was in danger of being squeezed because the word around the league was Ottawa was not on Ullmark's no trade now,
right,
but it could have been in 4 days, 5 days, whatever amount of days this is.
Right.
5 days. So again, I don't have that confirmed, but I do think it's a very plausible situation.
And as part of this deal, we should always look at the bigger picture here for the Boston Bruins. And part of that is they get a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit of cap flexibility here. We know that they're looking for at least one center. This doesn't address the entire cap situation that they'll need.
And a defenseman.
And a defenseman as well. But it does very much, it does very much point to the fact that, Sweeney and the Boston Bruins here need to get a little bit of work done before they can start to bring in some players.
And also, Ottawa's better. In Ullmark, you're better. And I really do believe that Ottawa was not the only team out there looking at him. I heard there were a couple others. I assume Carolina. I don't know Detroit. But I don't think Ottawa was the only team. But Ottawa held to it. They got their deal. And I think Boston knew that there was a limited window they had to get this done.
Do we see goalie hugs with Ullmark and Forsberg, or is that now done?
That's a good question. You should ask Ullmark.
I think the goalie hugs.
Or Swayman and Korpisalo.
Probably done Swayman and Korpisalo. There you go, swapping out goalie hugs. Okay, the other bit of news that came out on Monday, as someone texted me after all of this, after the dust started to clear on all this. Props to Gary Bettman for managing to get out of the situation with Alex Meruelo without a lawsuit. Alex Meruelo, and this is a Craig Morgan piece, and I want to give proper credit to him for doing the legwork on it. Craig Morgan reporting, Alex Meruelo calling it quits. No plans to pursue further arena options. Alex Meruelo is out with the Arizona Coyotes.
So I got a text during the game that something like this was going on, but there was nothing I could do in the moment. I was like, I'll work on this on Tuesday. Of course, it never got there because Craig was on top of things as is usual and got it done. There's a tweet out there. It goes like this. The haters said I couldn't do it, and they were correct.
Yep.
Honestly, great call from the haters. There is no more perfect tweet from this situation than that. The haters said Alex Meruelo would never pull this off, that he was a paper tiger, and they were right. It didn't even last 3 months. And now, basically what happens is Arizona becomes an expansion team.
Yep.
And what they'll do is they'll take their time. They'll figure out the arena situation. I'll say it again like I did last time. I think the NHL will go back there, but they'll sort out the arena situation, and then we'll see. But everybody who doubted Meruelo, and there were a lot of people, they were right. And, the thing is, too, you can work in business and operate in the shadows in a lot of places in the world. So whatever you do that's good or bad, people may not notice it. But in sports, you cannot hide. If you get into sports and you're incapable of doing what you say, then everyone is going to see it. I am amazed at how many people who are very smart in other things they do get into the sports world because they want to own a team so they can say, I own a team, and they realize they are now in the spotlight like they've never been before, and it can embarrass you if you're incapable.
Can I ask a question here that I know that none of us know the answer to?
Sure.
Does he get to keep his gambling license?
Honestly, Jeff, as I said the other day, I'm done with this one.
I'm surprised. I don't know. I'm surprised you didn't snore through my introduction to this one like you did last time. But bravo, you stuck with it.
A new story. Yeah.
You want to talk about a busy week in the NHL, Elliotte? This is a busy week in the NHL. And I know it can never happen, and I know it's not going to happen. And I always grouse about it. And I always say that if I were the commissioner for one day and I could make one move, I would get the Stanley Cup playoffs out of June, but I know that's never going to happen. This week, just sort of everything brushing up against one another, all these key events on the horizon here for each.
There's a lot of talk about the schedule. You're right, Jeff. We work in television, so we are the evils of schedules because a lot of things happen around us. For example, one of the reasons the season's starting a week later is ESPN has the baseball playoffs in the week that the NHL used to start, and their schedule is jammed, so they want the hockey to start a week later, and that's one of the reasons. And now that ESPN is reportedly about to make an extension of the NBA rights, and ESPN reportedly is about to do an extension of the NBA rights, so they're going to have the final, and they're going to have, this is year 3 of the 7-year NHL deal in the States, and they have 2 more finals. The NHL is always going to want to be away from the NBA final. This might be our reality. And I know a lot of people don't like that. But this is kind of the way it is, especially in the States. The teams want to stay away from football, and not just the NFL, but college football, which is on more nights than ever. High school football, very powerful force in some of these markets. I mean, I know not everybody likes it. I know some of the teams don't. And I will say this. I probably heard more grumbling about it privately from teams this year than I've ever heard it before. But I'm just not sure how much of this is going to change. Because, there are rules about how often teams can play and building share. So we'll see if they can do anything with this. So today is the Hall of Fame announcement. Wednesday, tomorrow, is Board of Governors. Thursday is awards. Friday is the first round of the draft. Saturday is rounds 2 through 7. Sunday is
travel.
the eve of crazy.
Yeah.
And Monday is free agency day. So the next week is going to be bananas. It's going to be completely insane. By the way, do you have Hall of Fame preferences for this year?
There's a couple, Elliotte. I always grouse about Lauren Shabbat, but as people from the Hall of Fame have told me before, the people voting in the Hall of Fame here never saw Lauren Shabbat play. I know that makes things difficult, but historical oversight and all. I know you've always had a soft spot for Steve Larmer. I share that. Alexander McGillney, ditto.
Yes.
Curtis Joseph. The interesting thing about Curtis Joseph, too, is it seems as if the Hockey Hall of Fame now wants to look back and have now realized that, you know what, maybe we've kind of given goaltenders the short end of the stick when it's come voting time. So I wonder if this is the year that Cujo finally gets in. And one of our colleagues, Jennifer Botterill, is probably going to get in sooner than later. And so I will keep saying that name, as I will keep saying Cassie Campbell-Pascal's name, and both eventually will get in.
Yeah, I'm with you on Cassie and Jennifer, considering we work with both of them. I'm all aboard those trains. I'm big into McGillney and have been for years. I agree with you on Curtis Joseph. I think the goaltender run of last year should put him in. I'm still on the Rod Brindamore train.
Yeah.
I think he should be in.
What about
New
Tocchet?
guys this.
What about Tocchet?
I don't know. I love Tocchet, but do you think he's a Hall of Famer?
I don't know.
Can't wait till my next coaches meeting in Vancouver.
He had a lot of success in the NHL and also international success as well.
A huge game in '87 in that deciding game against the Soviets.
Absolutely. I'm biased because I love the player. He was one of my favorites growing up. So
Yep.
I don't know. I'll throw him into the mix. I think we've all wondered about Pat Verbeek as well. The points, the cup. Even the
it's
Pims,
just hard to predict because you never know once they get into the room what they're going to do. Did you mention Patrick Marleau?
I have not mentioned Patrick Marleau.
Okay, so Patrick Marleau is eligible this year.
Yep.
He's got a pretty formidable case. Pavel Datsyuk, another guy with a big case.
I love Pavel.
You know who
Datsyuk,
else?
yeah.
You know who else I could see getting in on their first try?
Who's that?
Because he's the kind of player that hockey people love. Big bad Shea Weber.
First try though?
Hockey people love Shea Weber.
They do love Shea Weber. Yeah. I mean, we'll find out. I would.
They love Shea Weber like you love vegetables.
Oh, I do love vegetables. Oh, boy. Even for breakfast, I recommend broccoli and chickpeas. Okay, so those are some interesting names, and I'll make my annual gripe about transparency in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I know that everyone on the selection committee gets their backs up about it, but I think in the era right now, people want to know how these things get voted on, and whenever I hear, well, it could offend people, I always say, well, too bad. And then maybe you shouldn't be on the voting committee then if you're too worried about hurting people's feelings. I know that'll go nowhere and things won't change for a long time, but I like to think that one day the Hockey Hall of Fame will be more transparent about the process of getting people into the most hallowed halls in hockey. Anyhow, always look forward to the Hockey Hall of Fame. News of the week, Rutger McGroarty. So we mentioned this on the last podcast. He will be traded, whether it happens before or at the draft. Elliotte, do you have a spidey sense or a finger in the wind on this one?
I think it could happen before.
Okay.
Someone told me be ready right after the final. Be ready. There's two things I was told that to be ready for before the draft. McGroarty and Ullmark. I'm sure there's other things out there, but those were the two things I was told. Be ready for them.
So do you have a thought here or any more clarity on how this all happened with McGroarty? Because the one thing that I wonder about here is a sidebar to all of it. Whenever this McGroarty deal gets done, if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff in the Winnipeg Jets, one of the first things you want to do is change the story away from this kid doesn't want to play with the Winnipeg Jets. Much like Brian Murray, you'll recall after the Daniel Alfredsson situation happened, right away it was change the conversation, get Bobby Ryan in here. We need to have a positive story. I would imagine that if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, you need a positive story, and I wonder if that moves the needle on a Cole Perfetti extension or something like that as a demonstration to the marketplace that, look, young players do want to stay and play here.
I don't think you should make decisions like that.
Teams do.
I know they do,
Elliotte. They do.
Well, you know what?
You're
You're right. Teams do, but put it this way: not my team. If I ever had a team, you can't. And I recognize that public pressure can break things down, but especially in some markets as opposed to others, public pressure can really have an effect. But you shouldn't run your organization like that. That's how you walk yourself into trouble. And look, I think the McGroarty thing broke down at the end of his season. Some of his teammates at Michigan, Frank Nazar was one of them. They made their NHL debuts, but Frank Nazar did it in Chicago, and they had nothing to play for. Winnipeg was playing for the best possible position in a brutal division that featured Colorado and Dallas. And obviously it didn't work out, but that didn't mean the process was wrong. You had to go for the best seating you could get. And it wasn't like they could do it like Chicago could. But if you're McGroarty, you see your friend get a chance to make their debut, you don't get to do it, and there's probably some level of FOMO. And then you hear next year, you know what, we're not sure you're ready yet. You're not guaranteed a spot. And if you have your choice between going back to a third year at Michigan or going to the AHL in Manitoba, I don't know a 20 or 21-year-old kid who wouldn't pick going back to Michigan.
Especially with NIL
and I think
money
that's where it
available.
broke down. That's where it broke down. Now, I know the Perfetti's been brought up and Heinola's been brought up, and maybe that started to become a thing. Okay, somewhere down the road it might be like that, but I think in general it was a short-term thing that I think the relationship changed when the path this year and the early path next year, it wasn't open to him. And Jeff, one of the things that's kind of happening right now is there's this conversation going on about, especially now that Michkov has come over to Philadelphia or coming over to Philadelphia after a year. Like, if you negotiate a CBA and the players who go the USHL or the NCAA route have this option, then by all means, they are entitled to use this option. But that doesn't mean that 4 years after you're drafted, you become an unrestricted free agent. And that doesn't mean that the teams like it. And what we are clearly seeing now, Jimmy Vasey did it years ago. Adam Fox did it, one of the most famous cases. Cutter Gauthier last year, now potentially McGroarty. You are seeing more and more players unafraid to wield this power. Mm-hmm. And, people are joking right now that the Russians are easier to handle than the NCAA kids are. And they never thought that they would say that. That's what is being said over the last 24 hours.
It's funny you mentioned that.
It's a risk.
Monday driving in, I had this exact conversation with someone who said, say whatever you want about Russian players, and sometimes they take like an extra year to get there. But wherever they're drafted, they show up. And they play. And then, half of them end up going to the state of Florida and the other half go to New York eventually where they want to go. But they're drafted and they don't grumble. They go and play and they make their money and then eventually they go where they want to go. And he brought up that exact same point. He said, it's right now, the American kids are very comfortable wielding whatever power and leverage they have. And we used to always complain about, Russia this and Russian factor and all these types of things. But when they come, they just show up and play, Elliotte. You're right. That conversation is happening all over the place. And I wonder, and we're going to get to Michkov here, how much of a cascading effect that has on things like the draft. Let me get there in a second. Michkov was the other big story of the weekend, and the Philadelphia Flyers drafted him in the first round last year. Everyone wondered where he was going to go. The Philadelphia Flyers stepped up, and we wondered, okay, Russian factor, how long is it going to take? If he even ends up coming over to North America 1 year later, Daniel Briere, GM of the Philadelphia Flyers, has Matvei Michkov coming to North America. Now they have to work out a contract. They have to get the visa sorted out.
Yep.
But Matvei Michkov, as you know, Elliotte, is coming to Philadelphia.
Well, it's a huge win for the Flyers. There's no question about that. It's getting him over much faster than anybody anticipated. And Michkov did scare off some teams last year. But the other thing, too, is don't forget in all of this, Michkov made it very clear he wanted to play for Philadelphia. There was this whole clandestine thing about him meeting with them and saying he wanted to be there and convincing the Flyers to take him. I think it's, there's so much that happens in Russia that is just out of our control, especially the geopolitics of the world, and I don't want to make light of that. You just never know, but this is a huge win for the Flyers and their fan base. It's going to be very interesting to see what this does for their projection. Like, I don't think it's fair to compare him to Panarin because Panarin had been in the league for longer. But remember, the Rangers talked about a complete teardown, a rebuild, and then Panarin showed up on their lap and the rebuild was over. I don't think that's 100% a fair comparison, but injecting that talent into your lineup sooner than you expected, it's going to change the trajectory of the franchise. Like, that absolutely is going to happen. So it's going to be interesting to see, kind of what they do around him. Who do they look at to play with him? Who do they look to accelerate things a little bit? I mean, you could argue that not that the Flyers need a ton of help creating interest, although they sagged the last couple of years. But I can imagine that when the news broke Sunday and when the news officially gets announced, I guarantee you they had people calling and saying, okay, what's my ticket package for next year? So that gives them a bit of a bump and a bit of relief, but it's also going to raise the expectations. So to me, it's a big win for the team because they get the players sooner than they expected, but it's also going to be interesting to see what it means for how they sort of change their team. I mean, I do think they had something going on with Ottawa. I'm not so sure that's going to happen anymore. I mean, everything's going to be crazy this week. We'll see how things unfold. There's this whole situation with Konechny that I think those talks have gone a little slower than anybody would have liked, but does that really mean anything, or does everybody still think there's time to work this out? There's a lot going on, but Michkov is a massive W for them. Massive.
This changes a lot, and I just can't help but thinking, like, you look at all the balls that Daniel Briere has in the air right now, and overriding all of it is he's got to do something about his salary cap here. Like, I know you get the bump up in the off season, but still, like, if they're going to make some of these moves that we're all wondering about, a lot of these are going to have to be made after he deals with what he's going to do with his salary cap situation. Because the Philadelphia Flyers are right up against it, if not over it. So we'll see what happens with the Philadelphia Flyers here. But yeah, as you mentioned, Elliotte, massive win for them, getting Michkov over. And if you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan, get excited because this guy is a flat out hell of a player.
The one thing I wanted to say more about McGroarty is that I do think there's a lot of interest there. That the Jets are going to be able to make a pretty interesting deal here. Like, some people said to me, oh, their leverage is gone. Now everybody knows. I'm not buying that. I think the reason I found out about it was because a bunch of people knew. I think teams were already in conversations with them. I'm beginning to believe that maybe more teams have kind of gotten into this now, or knowing that it's out there have kind of raised their offers. It's going to be, you said on your radio show that you think they want established players.
I would think so.
I'm not disputing you, but I also think they're going to be able to use this if they want to move into the first round. It's going to be pretty fat, or maybe there's a deal where you can do both. You get a first round pick and established players. We'll see. I think the Jets have some options here. And also, and when I meant that last one, I think it's as part of a bigger deal. I think the Jets have a few things going on. I really do. 7
teams have 2 first rounders. So if you're looking to do something with the Winnipeg Jets, there are 7 teams that I can think of right out of the gate that might say, you know what, we've got an extra first rounder. Maybe let's give Kevin Cheveldayoff a call here. The reason I mentioned that I can see them wanting to do something and get actual players as opposed to prospects is this is a team that's right in there in the Central Division, which you mentioned is a really tough division, obviously. And I don't think the Winnipeg Jets are interested in taking a step back. I don't think ownership is interested. I don't think the manager, I don't think anyone, I don't think the market is interested in a step back. That's why I think that, I don't think they want to, dip back into the green banana business if they don't have to. Anything new with Jake Guentzel, Elliotte, as we continue Guentzel Watch?
I had someone tell me there's a lot bubbling under the surface there.
Okay.
and that there are some really good teams that you wouldn't think could do it that are wondering, how can we do it?
I'm trying to think of where I want to go with this
So-
one. Hang on a second.
That's what I was doing too. Like I wondered about Kings. You know, they cleared up a little bit of cap room
Yep. They
with
did.
Kemper. But, you know, Carolina's still around there. I really don't know that Vancouver's going to pull this off. But what this guy said to me is there are some teams out there that want to know if they can get Guentzel because they want him. They're good teams, but it might mean they have to perform some surgery.
Let me throw a name out at you.
Okay?
Who's always in and around it?
You're going to say Vegas.
Bingo! Where we're heading.
I don't know. You know, I honestly,
Yeah.
I don't know. The one thing someone said to me about Vegas is, you're right, they're always around it, but you have to figure an Eichel extension because he's 2 years away. So everything you do, you have to do with the lens of that. But, you know, I'm not saying no, I'm not saying yes. I'm starting to work on this a little bit, but that's what someone said to me. There are good teams floating around him that are like, if we want to know, like they said, don't be surprised if a team you're not expecting tries to trade for his rights to see what it's going to take
Oh, I could see
And-
that. Yes.
and what surgery they have to do.
I could see that. With his former team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, we most recently saw Kyle Dubas sign Alex Nedeljkovic to a 2-year contract extension, $5 million, 2.5 on the AAV. Should we, because at various times we've wondered about it, be thinking about Tristan Jarry here?
We should, because on our last podcast, we said, if you're looking for a number one goalie, you've got Ullmark and you've got Gibson, and who else is available right now? And this individual said, you are missing someone. And when I started to figure out who he was talking about, I landed on Jarry. That was the guy.
He
So
has
I wonder if he's at play out there too.
5 years remaining at 4.5 a season.
Good statistical numbers, health.
That's the big one.
Health is the big one. Good statistical numbers, though.
Good goal. Oh, listen, good goalie.
Yeah,
really good goalie. Just
Just got to stay healthy.
stay healthy.
So I was curious about that. That says to me there's something going on out there.
One thing really quick before we wrap here. Libor Hayek looking to make a return.
Yes. So Libor Hayek played overseas last year, and I have heard that he is looking to come back into the NHL. And there's a couple people out there who are rooting for him. Said a really nice kid. Two things really hurt him: separated shoulder, and the Rangers having him on the roster without playing him because he was waiver eligible. Said it was just one of those things that it went sideways on him, didn't work out, but now at 26 years old, he wants to have another chance. And I root for people like that. So I wanted to shout it out and mention it, that he's looking to come back over to North America.
Awesome. We wish him the very best. Don't forget, he was a former second-round draft pick of the Tampa Bay Lightning not too long ago. On that, we'll wrap the news segment. We come back with the Montana's Thought Line after this. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to the podcast, Montana's Thought Line time. Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. Gonna miss that song this summer. Who's kidding who? I'm gonna have it burning in my head all summer long. Thank you, Rick Turner, for that. 32 Thoughts at sportsnet.ca, 1-833-311-3232. The way to get in, Montana's Thought Line, curated lovingly by the great Griffin Porter. Diggity, if that is indeed your real name, in Edmonton, submits this one, Elliotte.
How could you even doubt that?
Parents are being very creative with kids' names, so why should I doubt that Diggity is indeed this person's name? Hey guys, it appears that the league has finally climbed out of the fiscal hole that was COVID, with the cap finally going up. With the Oilers making it all the way to Game 7 of the final, I have to imagine a hockey-mad market like Edmonton has been spending like no tomorrow, bumping hockey-related revenue to highs unseen in many years. Does the league disclose the revenue earned in the playoffs each year? Is it reasonable to think the cap is going to be higher than expected in 25-26? Or does a single market's performance over a 2-month span barely move the needle when it comes to HRR for cap calculations? Is Edmonton spending more money, making it more feasible to keep the Oilers' core intact longer? Love the podcast. That comes from Diggity in Edmonton. Interesting question, Elliotte.
A great question. One of the things that is true is that because of the CBA that was done when we went into COVID, the salary cap bumps for the next 2 years are previously negotiated. There's a 5% bump each of the next 2 years, which is why we're going to 88 next season, which they moved up by $300,000, and we're scheduled to go to just under 93 next season. Now, one of the things that has kind of been, I don't even know if anyone's even doing it. I think teams are doing it, but there's nothing quote unquote official, is where the cap is going to be in 2 seasons. Because there's some big guesstimates out there that we could be at 100 million, and that could open things up, and that could really change what teams are able to do. But nobody is going public with those numbers, or nobody's claiming there are any official numbers. For example, when the agents met, and they have 3 agent meetings right around the playoffs. There's usually one in New York, one in Los Angeles, and one in Toronto. And they talked about those 2 numbers for the cap next year and the year after, but they didn't go into anything official after that. So I think that's kind of what we're all wondering here. Now, the more teams like Edmonton, like the high revenue teams, Edmonton, Rangers, like them going to, 3 rounds this year, and in Edmonton cases 4, that's very good. That's very good for the cap. Like, one of the reasons I think this year they bumped the cap an extra $300K was because teams like that went deep into the playoffs. And, people would ask, could you go even more? They could, but there'd have to be a negotiation about it. And I don't think anybody was really prepared for that. So definitely the case is that the longer, more high revenue teams go in the playoffs, the better it is for the cap.
Essentially, if you're a fan of a small market hockey team or a smaller market hockey team, you want your team to get there, but everyone around you a large market team, so the salary cap rises. Diggity, right, if that is indeed your real name. Thank you very much for a great question. Okay, one more, because it's a huge podcast. Once again, let's get to Jake in Ottawa.
We all know that Jeff, his hatred towards the hockey song. And I was thinking, what would be then your favorite hockey songs? My submission would be 50 Mission Cap by the Tragically Hip. Thanks for all the work you guys are doing, and I hope you have a great time. Thank you so much.
Ooh, yes, I do have no time. And I know whenever I mention this, people just flood me with, audio clips of it, or remind me, or play it around me all the time. Elliotte, I don't know about you, but I have about 0 time for Stompin' Tom's The Hockey Song.
Well, that's my favorite hockey song, of course.
Ugh.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I was just saying.
Storm the crease like bumblebees. Oh God, vomit.
You can't be Canadian and hate Stompin' Tom.
No, I'm not insulting the anthem. This is a hockey song, man. It's awful. He's got way better songs. That was just, it's okay. Like, good artists record clunkers.
You told me he's pretty hurt to hear you talk like this.
I used to play hockey on his son's hockey team, Tom Jr. Don't worry about it. Everything's cool there.
I heard he's upset too.
No, he might be. There's a few that I really do enjoy, and there's one video featuring a lot of hockey players and one prominent hockey media personality that I want to draw people's attention to. But Rio Static's Battle of Wendell Clark is a favorite of mine. Hockey Sucks is a great song by a punk band called The Sweaters. The Zambonis have about 1 million hockey songs. My favorite is Hockey Mom. Lonely End of the Rink. Jake in Ottawa cited song. 50 Mission Cap, but Lonely End of the Rink, which I believe is about Gord Downey's dad. Gord Downey was a goaltender, and his dad would always stand behind him, behind the glass, to watch his son play. And I think that's where that song comes from. But the one that I want to draw people's attention to, Elliotte, I'm not sure if you have like a favorite hockey song, but my favorite hockey song / video is by an artist by the name of Kathleen Edwards, who's tremendous. She's got a video for a song called I Make the Dough, and it's shot at St. Mike's Arena, and Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo is in it. Marty McSorley is in it. Brad Delgarno is in it. Dave Hodge, the legend, is in it as well. And it's a song, I don't want to spoil what the song is all about, and the closing sequence as she leaves the rink is fantastic. I'm going to put a link to it when this podcast comes out, but that might be my favorite hockey video from any artist. The song, again, is called I Make the Dough by Kathleen Edwards. Do you, Elliotte Friedman, have a favorite hockey song? Oh, Paul Coffey's in that video, by the way, too. Coffey's awesome in the video as well.
Oh, boy. I don't know if I have a favorite hockey song as much as songs I associate with hockey, right?
Oh, that's good, too.
Jeez. I would probably say at the Lonely End of the Rink, because I remember at the Lonely End of the Rink, they debuted it as part of a tease at Hockey Night in Canada. And I was working sideline that night. And I remember Shirley Najak, who was producing, challenged me to work it into a couple of my in-game hits. And it went pretty well. So I always kind of remembered that as my favorite hockey song. I would say that one.
Okay, that gets me to mention something here, and that is from some of those old intros on Hockey Night in Canada. I can't listen to Love Reign Over Me by The Who without thinking about Tim Thompson's, and I believe it was an opening for the season, collage that he did for Hockey Night in Canada, and I can't, and whenever I hear that song, I always think of that collage and that opening for Hockey Night in Canada that Tim put together. And there's another one, it was before, I think it was a 2009 Stanley Cup final, Detroit and Pittsburgh. Josh Wilder, who was a producer with us at Hockey Night in Canada, put together an intro, and it was a takeoff on Coldplay's The Scientist. And to this day, I can't hear that song without thinking of Josh's intro to that series. So that's interesting, Elliotte, because those are the two songs that I always associate with hockey, and just because of the Hockey Night in Canada intro. So Josh, Tim, if you're listening, well done. Those two songs will always be hockey songs for me. I'm sure you listening right now have your own favorites. Feel free to send them in. The Montana's Thought Line, Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. We're back in a moment.
Jeff, Ellie, and Tom on 32 Thoughts. Try their ribs today.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. 32 Thoughts presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Ellie, I want to finish off by talking about the window, which does open 48 hours after the Stanley Cup is awarded, and that is the buyout window. Now, in the first block, you wondered and mentioned the name Jack Campbell and wondered if there was a buyout there. You've reported on Jeff Skinner of the Buffalo Sabres. I think we've wondered about people like Nate Schmitz of the Winnipeg Jets. I've wondered about JG Pajot with the New York Islanders. We know they're in a cap situation, and how is Lou Lamoriello going to wiggle out of this run to give himself some flexibility to improve that team? But nonetheless, who are some of the usual suspects for you this time around for buyouts?
Well, I think Skinner's the one we're all watching. That's the one. and they don't have to put him on waivers because he's got a no move clause. So they can just go to Skinner and say, we're going to do this. So that's the one I think we're all watching. Like I said earlier, Jeff, I think this is going to be a bananas week. I think there's going to be things that happen here that we absolutely do not see coming. And on one level, I'm kind of bracing for the crazy.
Yeah.
On another level, I'm really looking forward to it.
Make sure you get your rest. We will get no rest this week, bleeding into next week as well. Elliotte went over the schedule a couple of moments ago here on the podcast. The one thing we will let you know is we have at least one more podcast for you coming up this week. We'll record something in Vegas on Thursday for release on Friday, which will all become irrelevant by the time the draft starts. But make sure you get it and listen to it as early as you can, so you're as up to date as you can be. Congratulations again to the Florida Panthers, Stanley Cup champions, 30 years in the making. Looks great on the organization, looks great on the markets, looks great on those players as well. Congratulations to everybody in and around the Florida Panthers organization. Enjoy what, as Elliotte has mentioned, will be a crazy week. And we'll talk to you again Friday morning.